Welcome to our 2022 Yield Summit. This is the time we share things that we've learned from last season and how we're adjusting and shifting to be able to maximize our farming operations profitability for this coming season. And I must tell you, that's a lot of fun to review the 2021 season. In short, it was a great year. I don't think I've ever had more fun farming than I've had this past season. And if you step back and review, I bet you might say the same thing. In the past, there's often been things that we can point to that weigh on us and our ability to be fully rewarded for the work that we do to raise our crops. If prices are high, we might not have the bushels we hope for. If it's a bend buster, prices drop. If rain is in the forecast, we feel like it splits and goes around us. Most years, it's always something. But the stars lined up this year and has reinvigorated me. I can't wait to get back out there and do it again next year. I'm lucky enough to get to talk with a lot of corn growers all over the country. And most of them tell me that they've also had one of the best years ever. I remember talking to a lot of you growers in the north, and a lot of complaints were coming in from this spring and summer about it being super dry. And Jared from central Wisconsin was talking to me. He'd tell me, Greg, I'm really worried about this coming harvest. Well, take a look at this harvest monitor. Well, I tell you, I see 275 bushels. I'm telling you, that's just not too shabby. Now, don't get me wrong. It was still a lot of hard work, and there were many points along the way where it might not have seemed like a lot of fun. We did have our share of challenges. For example, in our farming operation, we did things that were new to us. This was the first year that we fought tar spot. And it was the first year that we took 110 acres and we grew triticale so we could have a cover crop, and then we were able to wet bale it for a feed for our dairy. Then we turned around and planted corn in it, and thankfully, right into that cover with an irrigation system, we were able to take that corn above 230. We also tested for the first time intercropping soybeans into wheat. So they were challenging and they added workload to our team. But we also challenged ourselves to learn new things. And that's fun for me and our whole team. Plus, it added revenue, opportunity, and that's always fun. But even the annual and sometimes routine operations become more fun when you know you're getting paid more for each task. Let me give you a list of some of the things I'm referring to. Planting early soybeans in the first week of April. Taking and running the planter 3 times in the seed field due to the fact that they wanted to have a 4-2 pattern. In other words, 4 female, 2 male. Oh yeah, those males were also split. So we ended up running every 6-row panel in that seed field with the planters. Ended up, I had majority of those 4-2 rows. I'm not complaining. I'm just saying, hey, how about reworking waterways and cleaning up those tree areas? Sometimes even putting in new crop areas. In one field, we gained 10 acres alone. Of course, then there's the late nights of tillage, the opportunity to put a new 360 rain unit in a seed field. And then when it comes fall, we had a chance to fire up the combines and really measure just how well we did this year with these crops. Now, part of the fun this year comes from being diversified. Like many of you, that can include livestock and sugar beets, carrots. A lot of local growers are trying organics for the first time, 80 acres or 100 acres here and there, to boost their profits. For our family, we really focus on specialty crops. For us, it's seed corn and seed beans, and of course, pumpkins. And they always end up being our most valuable crops. When the corn and bean prices are low, these specialty crops boost our revenue. But now this year, they looked really good. So yes, I had fun being a farmer this year, but let's look at what made this year so much fun. I can tell you the story this year in 3 simple lines. Let's write up here for this year, 2021. First line I'm going to put up is our inputs. Well, this past year, inputs stayed basically flat, maybe just slightly tinged higher, but at the same time from a year ago, very, very comparable. But how about those grain prices? I get excited when you and I think about we had the opportunity, many of us, to get into that 550 range on corn. And I'll tell you, selling corn at that price makes a whale of a difference. Of course, then the third line, production, is the one that really counts. And so most of us would say close to a record year or maybe a record year. If you look at the USDA, they're saying what, 177 bushel, all-time high? So if you look at the USDA's predictions, they're saying farms are going to have 23% more profitability this year than we've ever had in the past. So this is a combination, no matter how you look at it, you have to give it 3 stars for profitability. And for our family, without question, the best year of my lifetime that we've ever had. So we'll take a minute or two to celebrate here, but then we have to start thinking it could be a different story for next year. Let's just take a look at these same lines next year in 2022. Well, without question, we know what the input line has done. Inputs, straight up. Sometimes as much as not just double, but it's 3 times the cost. And we look. So the price, I would say it's just a little bit less. I'm going to say instead of where we were last year in that $5.50 range, let's put down $5. Still a great opportunity for us to lock in some real profits. But the third line is where you and I have to really start to talk and think about how are we going to keep production on the upward trend. So when we talk about yields, where are you and I going to do in our operation? What are the things that we can change to start to make a real difference? It doesn't take many more bushels to come over here and greatly offset the increase in dollars that you and I are spending. So it comes down to how do we manage? How do we manage the production side? We realize there's not a lot we can do about the grain price or about the input costs. Yes, there's tools out there that can help us lock in some pretty good prices. University of Illinois says what? They said there's going to be a 50% or greater reduction in farm profitability this year. So for us, it comes down to how do we increase production? Because this is something that you and I can control. Let's dig in. I'm going to tell you about the things that we're going to do in our operation to boost our production potential. You know, for the first time that I can remember, nitrogen as a fertility cost has surpassed our actual cost of seed per acre. And so it's become our number one input. And for me, when I think about it, the planter becomes without question the place where you and I can start to focus. When we talk about increase in production, the planter pass becomes, for me, the place where nitrogen really becomes fine-tuned. You know, Al, a lot of us, as we think about nitrogen cost, have large co-ops or ag chem dealers that have really done a good job of keeping up with the trend. So whether it's paying ahead, or whether you yourself have storage, take our own operation where we have our own tank farm, it makes quite a difference. So nitrogen has become quite a contributor. We're seeing what? You're hearing nitrogen prices $1 per pound of N for the first time, if I can ever remember. So for those that paid ahead, or for our own case, we're down in that 61 cents to 68 cents per pound of N. It makes quite a difference. That right out of the gate is $70 an acre savings compared to where we are in the current price. And I don't know. You know, we don't know. We can see at times natural gas is starting to drop, so maybe this anhydrous cost will come down. But without question, you hear stories of between $1,100 and $1,200 a ton. And so for us, it's about how do we manage this? And how do we put it on at the right rate? I think about all the things that happen in the field. And I talk about that planter pass, for me, being where it's at. It comes down to this for me, and we'll just draw it out here. If we come out and we put on all of our nitrogen ahead, let's just say in the fall of the year, and a lot of you were saying, well, Greg, we got it locked in at $750 to $800 a ton. We're putting it on because if we don't use it, it's going to go away and we're going to pay more in the spring. And so as much as 225 pounds of N went on in one shot. And I think about that and I say, what are other ways that you and I can maximize this kind of a high dollar input of nitrogen? Because as we think about putting it all on at one time, there's definitely risk. And it comes down to just how nature itself. We know what? We know in the spring when it starts to warm up, we got all kinds of these good little guys, and these are our friends. These microbials, their job is to break down residue. And they're going to come in and they feed on this residue on the top, and they use nitrogen as their food source. And we talk about corn stalks and bean stubble and all the cover crops, and we call it a carbon penalty. And we realize that as these little microbials are feeding on that, and that's their job, and in return, then what do? As they feed on that, they utilize that nitrogen, and at times, without question, we can see corn yields start to suffer due to the fact that we start to run low. And so as I think about where do we go with that planter pass, it becomes pretty obvious to me if we can put, with the different tanks that we see here, 360's got the tanks that go on the 8Rs and the RTs and the RXs. We got a design that we can go on and put nitrogen on the tractor, put nitrogen tanks on the planter, and then we can start to do what? We can start to band. I think about banding nitrogen. All the studies show it's 2x more efficient. So instead of putting on all 225 pounds at risk due to the environment, due to what's going to happen when it starts to warm up, if we could come in and band nitrogen, and as you look here at the 360 Bandit running on the row unit, you can see that we're going to come in and we're going to start to band nitrogen right 3 inches on each side of that seed. And once we put it in a band, we have much more control over the loss that could possibly happen. And so as I think about, we're going to come in and we're going to put that about 3/4 of an inch underneath the soil at 3 inches to the side. And of course, we know that we're going to get a crown here on that corn plant. That crown sets on that corn plant always 3/4 of an inch below the surface. And as that crown root starts to come out, that's later in this plant's life. For a long time, this corn is living off of mama seed. The starch in this seed drives that plant until what, about V5? That's the same time that you and I know that that plant's setting on how many rows around it's going to set on that ear. And so it's either going to set on 18 or 16 or 14 around due to stresses. So that's doing it. And then there comes a time when the crown roots start to come out and they're looking for nitrogen. As we think about where the band is putting nitrogen here in a concentrated band, we know as it starts to rain up here, we're going to start to drive that nitrogen down. And so that nitrogen is going to start to migrate down through the soil profile at the exact same time that these crown roots are starting to come out of that crown. And we talk about this a lot, about this being in the sweet spot. And so I get really excited about saying, let that planter pass, which is a free pass to us. Every row we're going to plant, we're going to know exactly where that row is. Now we can start to locate a band of nitrogen that over time is going to slowly migrate through the surface of the soil right at the same time this root system's going through there. And all of a sudden, we're going to have the most optimum potential to put on an ear the maximum amount of rows due to stress. If we stress this corn at V5, in other words, we'd had all of our nitrogen on top, and these guys are taking and the carbon penalty and eating and feeding off of that end, and this plant goes slightly under what it needs, we're immediately going to start to knock off rows around that ear. Every 2 rows is worth what to you? 10 bushel. So very common, if we wanted to set on 18 and we went to 16, that's a 20 bushel loss. Most of us don't even know it. You don't even see it. So as I watch here, as I watch our bandit run, I get really excited about the ease of potential. And you can see it here, putting down nitrogen on each side of that row at 3/4 of an inch. in a concentrated band. So in our operation, we're going to shoot for 80 units of N that come down. We know that that 80 units with sulfur is going to do what? It's going to grow corn to head tall without any kind of stress due to environment and that. That's more than enough N to get us to what? V10. So we get to shoulder high V9, V8 here is in our pocket range, V9 to V10 is head to shoulder tall. We have enough N to go at that stage, so now we're off and running. Then we're going to come back with some additional nitrogen. If we look at what the banding over in a corn on corn, banding over all applied up front, either in the fall or the spring, some pretty exciting results over multiple years of trials. And so for us, we're showing a 16 bushels. So in other words, the trials were set up of 200 pounds of nitrogen, broadcast ahead of the planter, worked in, compared to coming in and putting on 80 units of N with the bandit and coming back of a side dress pass of 120 on both. So we had 80 pounds spread pre-plant, worked in. We had 80 pounds in with the bandit. The side dress was the same, taking us up to 200. And all of a sudden, we're showing what? 16 bushel response. And I look at this and we start saying, what are the things you and I can do to increase production? And so at the same amount of nitrogen, we start talking about $5 corn. Those are real numbers. And these are the things that as we go through today, we're going to say these are the things we're doing in our operation to fine-tune our production, to take risk out of our program. So if we have those 80 units on, what are we going to do at that stage? We're waiting on what? We're waiting on these little microbial guys to go to work. We know they have the potential to produce what? Free nitrogen. So as we think about our corn plant out here, we got the crown, and we got your crown roots coming down. Of course, we got the band of N, and we got that nitrogen in here. At the same time, we know these guys can come and they can feed on that band, but they won't eat it all. Nothing like they will off the top here. As that temperatures increase and these population microbials expand, we're going to be able to keep this corn plant in a very, very healthy state. And anytime you and I see corn never a stress, we know yields go up. At the same time, these guys give off what? Free, and I love that word, free nitrogen. How much? A lot. You get the right kind of growing season, and you can see it. We can test this with our soil scan. We can go out in June, between that June 1st and June 20th, and we're taking soil probes, and we're measuring how much available nitrogen that these guys gave us, and we can see as much as 80 to 100 pounds free. If you told me you had all your nitrogen on, and you had put anhydrous on that last fall at 225 pounds, and all of a sudden these guys give us an extra 100 pounds free, you already wrote the check, and you paid for it. Where I now have the ability to do what? I have the ability to come back in a side dress. And when we talk about side dress, we're talking about coming in corn, like I said, above our waist to shoulder high. We would come in with the Y drop, and we would come into there, and we would have the Y drop come through, and we would put on what it takes to finish the race. And in our case, we're measuring. I already have 80 on with the planter. My goal is to come in and put about 105 more on. Our goal is 185. Year in and year out, that's our target that we shoot for. We're looking for what? 0.7 pounds of nitrogen to raise 1 bushel of corn. Not 1.1, like most agronomists will tell you it takes. And so we're looking to become more efficient due to the fact we're going to utilize nature here and let it work for us. And so if you have it all on, you don't get to capture that free money. I have the option of pulling the 105 back and maybe only making it 80 more, or maybe only 60 more. And over the years, we've been able to fine-tune this, and I would just say it this way. By coming in with the Y drop, in other words, where we come in And we're coming with the wide drop down the row. We'll draw the stalks here in a 30-inch row. And we know that hose is going to put, and it's going to put that nitrogen right down beside the row. And so now we have, and the other row right beside you is doing the same thing. So now on top of the soil, right beside the stalk, we put a band of nitrogen. And the results of this over many years of testing across the country in many of the states, we've shown a 12.6 bushel response. What is that? $80+ an acre? We're talking this year, $80 is something you and I need to go after. And so when I think about the response we've got by coming in to shoulder high corn, putting on the additional end to finish, after we measure, we know exactly what it's going to take to finish a race, and we've seen quite a response compared to where we just put on the 200 pounds. So not only are we looking to save nitrogen, we're also looking to increase yields. And I can share with you that our family operation and many others across the country, this has been a tremendous asset. What about other crops? We work with Eric Reed out of Middleton, Tennessee. That's right on the border of Alabama and Tennessee. And Eric is one of the national corn grower winners. I think his family won both Tennessee and Alabama over in dry land now. Over 328 bushel of corn. But on their cotton side, and he shared the numbers with me this year, and he said, Greg, for the first time we took wide drop into cotton. Our normal program is we would come in and we would side dress with 100 pounds of urea. In other words, they would come in and they would side dress. This is a dry. They would spread that across the top. He said we did a 300-acre trial. So on 300 acres, they did 100 pounds of nitrogen with urea. They come in then with wide drop on a liquid, and they put 100 pounds in equal. And he said, I wouldn't have believed it if I wouldn't have seen it. They had average 300 pounds more of cotton. And you and I that are in the corn areas, need to understand what kind of dollars we're talking here. Eric had priced his cotton for 94 cents a pound. So we're looking at what? We're looking at $282 per acre increase due to management of nitrogen. And you and I can do the math in a heartbeat in our heads on 1,000 acres of cotton. We're talking more than just pickups and kitchen cabinets. And so I get excited when I think about the potential that we have in monitoring some of these different variables. Yes, nitrogen is high. You and I have to go at it. It's not an option this year to say, well, we're just going to reduce the amount we're going to put on. I've talked to growers. We were at the cattle show down in Louisville, Kentucky. Growers said, Greg, I'm just going to pull way back. And my first indication is, but yet what's going to happen to yield? And if we start to pull back and yield, that's things that really concern me. So what else as we talk? We got the nitrogen covered. What else happens in that planter? Without question, you and I know there's 100 different options that we can to dress a planter for getting what we call the perfect stands. And when we talk about closing, that's something that's out there that's, how do we close behind that planter? Boy, we saw that this year, didn't we? With some of the rains that we had in some of these areas where we were wet. And so I'd like to talk to you about what 360 has been working with on our 360 wave system. And that's where it comes in. It mounts right in between those disc openers. And it's all about saying, can you and I create an environment? So we'll put this seed, let's just pick a number. Let's just say it's 1 3/4 inches deep. So we're going to plant him 1 3/4 inches. So how do we close this seed trench and all the different styles of closing options that are out there? So I'm going to show you here what wave looks like. And you see it running here. And yes, this is in a sand bench. But it's coming in from the right-hand side, and it's closing 3/4 of the bottom of that seed trench. And so it's going to do an excellent job of enveloping this moist soil from the right-hand side wall. It's going to take it and lay it over. You think about that, you see immediately we've taken out any kind of problems with this sidewall, we've immediately eliminated that. Crown roots now are going to come right out. No longer are we trying to push it from the top down. When you and I try to create, and there's all kinds of systems, you see a lot of new two-stage systems out there. In other words, they're saying, well, there's two different processes that we can do from the top. We got disc, and then we got pressured wheels. And I have to smile because the harder you push from the top does not guarantee that you're going to close it. And so when you and I think about closing a seed trench, how do we know that we got the right structure and we got it closed? Take a look at this right here. And so when you see so on the left there, you can see where this gap, it closed the top, but it left a seam here that's going to open up. You can see right on the right-hand side of that picture, you can see where the seed trench, the dry dirt came in from the top and it fell in. And you can see here as we take our jackknife, you can see that we're showing you that dry. So what are we going to do? We're going to get a misfire. We're losing moisture around that seed. In this case, over here where it's wet, we didn't do a good job of closing. I can almost guarantee you, after 3 days of planting, after the planter ran in that field, of course, we got the sun shining up here. This here is going to start to open up. And as this spike comes up, if the spike sees any sunlight at all, what does it do? It unfurls. And now we're pushing a rope up. We got leaves that are pushing up. Most times that thing will just go around twice and it'll be called what we call a misfire. And so when I watch this, and you can see here, one of the new, 2 series types that are out there, and you can see here where it come, and you can see where its closing didn't happen. Look on the right side where wave went, and you can see the loose structure. So where we came in and we kicked that loose soil over, and then lightly firmed from the top, all we're doing now is asking us to hold moisture. So all we're doing is saying, can we hold moisture by sealing enough that we don't evaporate it, but we have a tremendous avenue for that spike to come up and out. And as I watch this, and you can see here where my hand is in the seed trench, you can see where wave is off to the side, and you can see exactly where the seed is placed, and you can start to understand exactly what this blade is doing as it runs as we plant corn. Now, we started with the goal of saying if we do the right job of closing, and we have the right technology of planter, we should be able to increase plant stand by 1,000 plants per acre, or 1 plant per thousandth of an acre. And that's been my goal from day one. Can you and I, if we set the planter at 35,000, can we get 34,000 up? I'll accept 1 misfire out of 1,000th of an acre, so in a 30-inch corn, that's 17 feet 5 inches. But at the same time, we're looking to say, we're not going to accept 3 missing. And so the goal was saying, can we, with wave, get always 1 more plant up compared to any other closing systems out there? And we've done a lot of research, and I'm excited to the kind of results that we can see. The Peters family in Indiana took their planter on every row, they put a different closing system. Then they did many, many counts. And we met the goal. They had the furrow cruiser as their standard. And when we started taking a look, they had furrow cruiser with 360 wave at 1.3 plants additional. They had a rubber tire 360 wave right at 1 plant per thousandth of an acre. And then they had the cast iron with wave, and it doesn't surprise me, it likewise was 1.3 more plants than the standard system that they've been farming with for years. When we think about every plant putting on an additional ear, that could be up to 7 bushel per acre in value to you. So this is very similar to the results that we saw on our own testing, where we saw as much as 6 bushel an acre. Go out to your website and go and look at the 360 wave session and go in and look at the detail that we were able to present to you. I'm excited about the results that we have. How about, though, where you see the jackknife here, and you see it right off to the right side, and you see it over about 3/4 of an inch and probably about a 1/2 inch deeper than the seed. So we designed wave to have the capability to put on starter. So what we're saying is, Wave's going to come in here, and it's going to close that 3/4 of an inch of that soft, moist soil over the top of the seed. Then it's going to create a spot where you and I can put starter fertilizer. And you say, well, Greg, I'm looking at starter this year, and it went up 2.25 times over last year. So let's talk about why would we use starter and how does it benefit? And we realize we're doing what? Well, the first little seedling root out is called the radicle. And that little root out has a tremendous amount of potential. It comes out, and the minute it's looking for phosphates, a plant this age is living off the starch in the seed, so it's not looking for nitrogen. It's looking for phosphates, and it's saying, what can I find out there? So even where our farm, where we have high P1 levels, it's common for us to have a 41 to 38. Probably the highest I would have would be 44. And you say, well, Greg, why would you use starter with these kind of P rates? Well, you know about a soil particle. And as that root comes through that soil particle, it's all driven by temperature. So if soil temperatures are 65 degrees or higher, as that root goes down through the soil, it can accept and get the phosphates off of that soil particle. If it's 65 or less, and you and I plant a lot of times in the middle of end of April, and where you see what? 58 to 60 degree soils are common. That little root can't find any of the phosphates that it wants. It's trying its best, but it's not released off that soil until it gets to 65. So we're coming in here and we're looking for what? We're looking for more growth. We're looking for a healthier plant right out of the gate. How many times have you and I seen a picture like this where an agronomist is kneeling down the field like I am, and he's showing you that the starter check is 6 to 7 inches less in height than where they use the starter itself. And when we see that, so without question, we can argue about yield and say, is it going to create more yield? I can say over the lifetime of my corn production, it's probably in that 8 to 10 bushel. Pretty common, 8 to 10 bushel response to starter. But not always a given. What is a given? 5 to 7 days quicker. Not only out of the soil, but more growth and maturity. We can get to the end of maturity faster. And you can see it here in this slide. You can see the kind of production as we look at the ears at this stage. Over on the left with no starter, on the right with starter, and you can see the maturity difference. And so I'd have growers call me. In the last several years, we plant corn due to wet, cold conditions. We've had to plant corn right in that first week in June. And growers will call and say, well, Greg, right at this time, we surely don't need starter if we're at warm soils. And I smile and I say, definitely use starter. If I'm planting on May 28th, and we're saying, well, we got a 112-day maturity hybrid, do we switch it out? Well, if we use starter, we can knock 5 to 7 days of maturity off of that. So instead of switching to 105-day corn on June 1st, I would stay at the 112. If I'm putting starter on, I'm just going to get it that much quicker to the end of the race. And almost always 1 to 1.5 points drier where we use starter. So everything about it, I'm fine-tuned, and I really like what it does. But at the same time, you notice I said it's 2x plus higher in cost. And so it makes you kind of take a step back and you say, well, what are we going to do this year and how do we manage this? Do we really want to put those kind of dollars into something where we're talking about, yes, we're going to get a healthier, quicker growing plant. Yes, there's potential for more bushels. So let's take a look at it. We realize that the cost, and this year it's going to be what? $40+ an acre for starter? So let's just draw it out here. Let's just say we want to drop 35,000. So we know we'd be what? 6 inches apart in the field. That would be That would be 35,000. And so if we come out and we put starter all the way in a continuous stream, we're going to be looking at $40 or plus per acre. At 360, we said, well, what about if we would design a technology? So at 360, we designed a technology called Dash. And it's got the capability, it mounts on every row, and it's got the capability of what? You see this little unit that goes right on your row, and you can see that every time now that a seed comes out of the seed tube, it's going to put out a dash of product, timed so that it's going to be right beside the seed. So wherever the seed is, we're going to have a dash of product with the whole hope and desire and potential to not only increase yields, but cut dollars spent. So if we look at a 3-inch dash over here that's timed right where the seed is, so the minute that seedling, radical root, comes out, it's going to grow through. The 3 inches here, what I call no man's land, has no starter. We're over here, you have 100% of this cost. But if we only do 3 inches each time, we could cut the cost in half. So now we're down to $20 an acre expenditure. Well, the interesting thing is from day one, we said not only let's try 3 inches, could this technology be accurate enough that we could put down a 2-inch dash? So we can cut this cost in a third again. And so now, instead of being a half, now we can take this down, and now we're down in the $15 to $13 an acre with the 2-inch. The root still sees it at whatever rate that you want. So let me give you some examples. So in the past, let me just redraw it so we got plenty of room. Last year, we're putting down 12 gallon of starter. And it, so on a continuous rate, it would have been 12 gallon if we had our seeds here. Over here where we're using dash, I'm using a 2-inch rate. So we're only putting on at 2 inches. So what I'm actually, the plant sees 12 gallon, but the actual usage per acre is a third. It's only 4 gallon that I have to haul the field. So my 400 gallon tank on the hitch of that planter can do what? 100 acres per fill. Where over here, if you put it on steady, you would not be able to do near that amount of acres. You'd only be doing about 33 acres of actually before you'd have to stop and fill. And so this cost us, we were spending about in that range. In the previous years, we were spending about, $12 on this program right here. And, for $12, I said, I think that's something we can definitely do. Well, starter went up 2.25 times. So it went up from $421 a ton last year to $960 a ton this year. I look at this and I tell our team, I said, we're not going to be able to justify those kind of rates. So we pulled back. So this year we're going to use 6 gallon rate per acre. So over here, if you were doing the full stream at 6 gallon, you're going to be spending about $40.29. Over here, of a 2-inch dash, we're going to be spending $13.43. But I only need what? 2.5 bushel at $5 corn to pay for this system. I'm willing to risk the benefit. So my little radical root's going to grow right through this 6 gallon an acre rate. I'm only going to be putting on 2 gallon to the acre. So now I can do what? 200 acres this year with a 400 gallon tank. The seedling root sees 6 gallon. The cost to Gregg is going to be $13.43 an acre. It's going to take me 2.5 bushel to pay for it. I'll take those odds. Compared to over here, if we were doing 6 gallon in a steady stream, either around the seed or on the seed, you're going to be spending $40, and we need 8 bushel over here to break even. And that's a load. Those are things that, for me, that we're just going to take a hard look at. So I'm excited about the 360 dash, the capability. I would say it this way: if you took a 16-row planter and you dress it to kill, you put the best of everything on it to run with the dash, your break even is less than 774 acres. You paid for the total system year one. So if you're saying, well, Greg, if my 16-row planter, I got 1,200 acres of corn, 775 to 1,200 is directly savings in your pocket. I get excited about this kind of technology being offered, the kind of potential that we have. As we think about nitrogen and carbon credits and residue, take a look at these stock bales that we have here at our dairy. And so I baled 250 acres of corn stalks because we use a lot of bedding for our cows and for our heifers and for the dry cows. And so we baled all these bales off, and we know exactly how many it's going to take. So there's over 1,400 bales there to get us through the year. And so we go into the barns and we bed that. The minute we remove that off the field and we do tillage in that field, you realize that next spring, of course, we'll bring manure back in the fall. Before we do the tillage, it'll have manure back on it. And when we look at the type of manure we're bringing back, I like the finished look of this manure. So you see the dry program that we're doing here. You can see that he's getting ready to take this spreader out in the field. So we'll spread that. We'll till it in. So we took the corn stalks off. What we brought back is enhanced. And it's got a ton of potential. And when I start thinking about what manure is going to do for us, like I said, I can't wait the next year. And so in our operation, manure is king. So for between the dairy and the hog production, we're saying, to me, this is God's tremendous reward to us. When we look at a high year of nitrogen prices, manure becomes quite an adventure for us. And so we look at how are we going to manage it. So for our farm, we're looking at over 850 acres of manure application, saying, how do we cut dramatically our input costs with manure management? And so it's something we focus a lot on. You take the hog farm, where these hogs aren't ours, we're getting the manure and we're spreading the manure on our ground. And so it's a task that I say to these guys, go, go, go. I can't wait to see what kind of production we can get. And so for this year, our hog buildings are on a farm that's had manure in the past. So we took and we said, what if we take the drag line? And so we're going to give you a fast view here of the drone, and you can see exactly what a 3 miles plus of drag line looks like. And so you can see that we had to go down the road and through the culverts and across the way. And then we're here in a 500-acre field where all this manure is going to go this year. And we're going to be putting on, of that liquid hog manure, we're going to be putting on 5,600 gallon per acre. This farm is needing some help. Fertility is low on it. And so you can see here the drag line operation. This is a custom operation that comes in. He's got a 35-foot disc bar. I really like the way it's installing. This is a seed corn farm, so you can see the seed stalks. He's running right here on it. If we bring you a close-up of this bar, you can see here those disc blades are running in about 5 inches deep to 6. The manure is about 4 inches under. You can see that we're getting a good job of covering. But the minute you and I start talking about 3 miles or more, obviously dollars go up. And so I'll just give you the analysis for us and what it costs. Costs of inflation that we have and the extra fuel and the team that it took to put the hose out. We ended up being about $140 an acre that we spent on the manure team to get it in there and to get it on per acre. But at the same time, when you look at the analysis that we had, So at that 5,600 gallon, that finished manure ended up being a 210, 110 of phosphorus, 145 pounds of potash, and 20 of sulfur. If you price that fairly today, we're looking at $380 of value per acre. Now, yes, 140 is more than I want to spend. But when I see what I was able to pick up just in value on that 500 acres, I'm excited. I know that this organic manure will outproduce a dry fertilizer any day of the week. And so I get excited when I think about the potential that we have. When I was talking to our custom operator, he said, Greg, we actually ended up having to buy another whole dragline system due to the fact, like yourself, farmers wanted to go different fields further away from where the actual livestock is housed. And so when I talked to him, he said, I had 15 million gallon orders come in due to the high price of nitrogen. Guy said, I want to haul it 5 to 10 miles to a field that's never had manure before. And so I asked Ryan, I said, well, what's that going to cost? He said, the trucking alone is going to run him $120 an acre. And then they're going to spend about $70 an acre to $100 an acre for the dragline, depending upon how many acres it is. So they're sitting right at $200. And you say, well, how can they afford that? Well, if you look at the value, it starts to make a lot of sense to me. And so I know my boys won't like to hear it, but we just need more cows. And we definitely need more hogs. And so this here is our goal, saying, how do we manage this? And what I've seen, what we've been able to do, one of the poorest farms that we got that's had hog manure had the highest bean yields whole farm per field. And so it's got the lowest fertility, 2 years of hog manure, put it in the highest yielding beans that we had anywhere in our operation this year. And those are the things that make Greg get to thinking and get a pretty good sized smile on his face. As we think about challenges this year, you know, we talk about challenges. You see me harvesting here. This is our first field that we're harvesting. It's September 8th. It looks like it's November 15th. Corn's starting to go down. Corn is tangled. There's not a green leaf in the field. And it's right after Labor Day. Corn's running what, 28.5% moisture? And Greg's taking it out. I watched this field change in 7 days. Now that I've been introduced to tar spot, I have a respect for a leaf disease that I didn't even know was possible. And I've been talking to you that are up by the Great Lake area, my customers, and a lot of you say to me at a farm show, Greg, you got tar spot? And I said, no, thank goodness we do not. Oh, they say, just wait till you get it. And so this is our turn. And this year it came into our county with a vengeance. And you put the kind of moisture that we had in the end of August and September, 6 and 7 inch rains. And I saw a study where 41% of the days from August 15th through end of September were rain days. And you see that kind of moisture, you can see where the disease went through the roof. And you look at this plant here on the screen and you see the kind of pockets of tar that are on there. And tar spot is a feeder, a vicious feeder of any other leaf disease. So here we had gray leaf and northern leaf blight and rust. And then you put tar spot on that with the moisture conditions that we had, and it took this corn down in 5 to 7 days. It changed it overnight. And so if you didn't have a fungicide on this year, without question, you're 30 plus bushels behind. Even if you look here on this field that I was harvesting, this is the check. What you see here, the leaf on the right has been sprayed one time, fungicide at the proper time, Deloro, compared to the leaf on the left. And so we had a 2.5 acre check in here. And it's 24 bushel difference to 30 bushel difference. And you can see it on the ear. As you look on the right side of that screen, you can see that top ear. You can see what we did what? Tar spot, when tar spot come in, it was late. It took out what? Grain fill. So we think about grain fill, and we talk about the depth of kernel. So we talk about this kernel and the weight in that kernel. And this is where the yield loss came from. So the yield loss that we see in the field came late, and tar spot took it. You can see it in that top ear. So Gregg's going to tell you that you better get ready to go. And when tar spot hits your area, you're going to be in there and you're going to be running. You can see the picture of our Hagee here. And so we did some single applications and we did double applications. The problem is we didn't do enough fields of double applications. I was asleep on the switch. Yes, I knew we had tar spot. We scout fields every week. I wasn't aggressive enough. I should have did 100% of our corn acres with 2 pass. So where we did 2 pass, fields are 260 to 265 average. Where we did 1 pass, this is a 2-pass system. Where we did 1 pass system, they were in the 245 to 250. And where we did none, they're down in the 212 to 220 in a few checks that we had. And so when I think about what the things are that we can offer you, our undercover system where we spray from the bottom up becomes really full attention. And so our customers that we had that were spraying from the bottom up in that plant, yes, still using nozzle on the boom down. So in our case, 4 nozzles, putting on 18 gallon of product with water into that row, created quite a difference. Can you still see the tar pusses on that leaf? Yes, that's a 1 app. Fungicides that we have today will not kill tar spot. So it's going to come down to several things. It's going to come down to getting the right fungicide product, probably spraying pre-tassel and post-brown silk. It looks to me like that's where all the yield come from, was from that late spray. And then it comes down to understanding which hybrid. Look at this field here. And so we had 2 different hybrids in here. The one's a little more of an older hybrid that's really been a high yielding. The other one's a brand new first year out. It had produced over 290 bushel the previous year in our variety plot. And anytime you're between 290 and 305 my variety plot, you get my attention. And so we have it every other 24 rows here. And it ended up being 24.8 bushel difference. Field is sprayed once. The hybrid itself made 25 bushel difference picking the right one. So the girl that we're going to take to the dance next year is going to matter. This is where you and I need to talk to our friends and our colleagues in the neighborhood and say, did you have one that really stood out? Oh yeah, that XYZ hybrid, that thing really took tar spot on the chin. Now let's hope in 2022, tar spot's maybe not quite as bad. That's optimistic. You can see Gregg's always lean. I always see the glass half full. And maybe it just won't be quite the same soil conditions. Would I be gutsy enough to plant this one again? Probably not. Even with a 2-pass spray, I'm worried this brand new hybrid just is not going to play at the rate that we want it to play. But when we do things right, and we get it to where we get these kind of yields next year, then we have some additional money to do things that probably need to be done. And so when I say our family had the highest profitability we've ever had, and you see this tiling machine running, you can see Gregg's reinvesting back in the ground. And I'm thinking about my grandkids and the next generations is what can you and I do to raise the bar? And tiling for me is a huge, huge potential for growth. Yes, no question, plastic tile increased in price just like gasoline and your food at the grocery store and everything else. But for us, it's paramount to get rid of those wet spots. Let's take a look at it in bean production especially. So we talk about in beans, we want to plant early. And so you can see here, our program is we do tillage in the fall. Yes, we still do some no-till. But where we're doing no-till, I'm running the vertical tillage harrows twice. I'm running them in the fall just to incorporate those stalks, start to get a breakdown. Then 2 days before the planter starts there early in April, I run that high-speed harrow again on the no-till. And the full tillage, we're going to come in, and you can see this 2230 folding hitch here. You can see this field cultivator coming in here, and what are we trying to do? We're taking care of early weeds. Why? Well, these are seed beans, okay? And guess what? They're non-GMO seed beans. And so we're concerned about how do we manage that flush of weeds. So in our case, the seed beans, we're doing a full tillage. If that's field cultivator, if the right shovels, we're leveling it up and we're taking out the early flush. So in this case, we would not be doing a burn down. And then you can see the planter coming here. And you say, well, how early would you go, Greg? As early as I possibly can if it's fit. And so what we found is the fields where we have the pattern tile. In other words, where we've tiled, those are the early fields for soybeans. And it has worked out tremendous for us. So when you see me here, right here, this is April 3rd, and I'm planting, yes, it's a 20-inch planter, so we're in here in 20-inch rows. We're dropping 120,000 seeding. I probably should say that. That's what I want as a final. I'm dropping 123. Might as well just get it right on the money. And so I got my monitor set on 123. I'm using a single cell disc. I can get by with that because I got a 20-inch planter, and yes, I'm still driving 7+ mile an hour, but I can get by if a single cell disc. I like the way it singulates. And so we're in here and we're going in early due to the fact that drainage has taken place. That soil is fit. Is there risk of cold weather? Absolutely. On May 9th, you can see here the effect. It got down to 28 degrees. And you can see the frost in the leaf. Was Gregg concerned? Absolutely. And so I realized that if we plant early, there's always a risk. There can be a replant. Fortunately, we've not had. And so I've been planting early beans now, oh man, I should know exactly. I'm going to say 5 to 6 years. What are we really saying? If you look at this orange pin here, it's just a standard ballpoint pin. That shows you about the height of these beans. So these beans were put in early. They were put in that first week in April. And you can see what? You can see right where I'm reaching down, I'm showing you already this plant has blooms. This plant is flowering at 6 inches tall. And so we go after early planting because over the years of research, we know what? We know that the earlier you plant, it's all about the flowers. How many flowers can we set on, and it's going to drive yields. And so I just drew a little chart here. I'm going to put June 21st down here. This is the longest day of the year, okay? This is the longest day in the summertime. And so that's also the shortest night. We know back up in here, let's just pick imaginary day. If we can plant before this, let's just grab imaginary time. May 10th. If I can put all my beans in before May 10th, there's a chance, due to longer nights at this stage than down here, and the nights drive the protein in the leaf to set more flowers. And so after we get past a certain date, as the nights get shorter and shorter, they're not going to flower till they get over here. Now we got beans that are what? Knee high before they're starting to set as many flowers as you and I'd like to see. And if you take a tape measure like you see here, so these are the early beans. And you can see from ground level up, the first pods are only what? 4 to 4.5 inches. The exact same variety, planted 19 to 20 days later, was what? 9.5 to 10 inches. All those lower pods did not develop because of night length. If you take the actual pod count itself, you can see here what? You can see that those that were planted on April 2nd ended up with 68 pods per average per plant. Those that were planted on May 26th had 45 pods per plant. And you look at that and you can say, well, that's got to make a yield difference. And you can see the same variety here. That was 19 days apart. So right here are these beans where we could check them. Planted 19 days apart, 10.1 bushel. For you and I, this year in a $13 bean market, we're looking at $130 per acre. Don't tell me that you and I can't give our employees a raise. We can't update tractors and planters and pickup trucks because this here, what we're talking about, makes sense. You say, well, Greg, I only have one planter. And that might be. Then plant beans first. Put starter fertilizer in the planter. Do corn a week after you get your beans planted. If you tell me you can plant all your beans in 7 days, why wouldn't you plant your soybeans first? And if you got starter fertilizer the second week, now the whole neighborhood's been running corn. You're the only guy in the neighborhood running beans, and they all know you lost your mind. On the second week, you start corn. If you have starter fertilizer and your neighbors don't, how far behind are you? 0. The 5 to 7 days advantage a starter gives you, you're going to harvest exactly the same day. Only difference is you're going to have 10 to what? 13 bushel is our average over about 5 years on our farm for early planting. So things that you and I need to pay attention to. At the same time, in our seed fields, and I told you we love seed production, our isolation acres, our beans on beans on beans, as many as 5 to 6 years in a row, if we need to isolate compared to the neighbors doing continuous corn, we got way too many years of soybeans. So we're looking at different options, and you can see here we're using wheat. In this particular field, we're coming in with wheat. And we're saying, is wheat an option? If we come in and we put wheat in the isolation, so for our case, we got to put what? We got to put 330 feet of isolation. So in a big seed field, I've seen as much as 60 acres of isolation. So instead of doing soybeans on soybeans on soybeans, what if we came in there and we put wheat, and then, I can get it spelled right here, wheat in there, and then we would come back in and we would double crop soybeans right behind it. Could we increase the return in bushels? Since we have a dairy, I'm always interested in bedding. And so you can see here, last year as we started to play at this, we put this wheat field out, and we said, we're going to take the bedding off, and then we're going to come in and we're going to double crop soybeans right on where we removed all the residue. So it's a pretty good scenario. So on July 8th, we're in here, we're putting these beans in, and you can see here that they're emerging. And we said, what if? Let's try that and see what that would compare to intercropping. So what if we would come in and we would put wheat and soybeans together in an intercrop? And so in the fall, we put out a 40-inch strip of wheat, and we left a 40-inch bare ground. That was in the fall of the year. With the intention of coming back in the spring here, and you can see my 20-inch planter, and we come in and we said, we're going to put 2 20-inch rows of soybeans in that bare strip. Yes, you can see my row units are running down right across the wheat, and you can see a mark there. And so there's some cost to that. At the same time, you can see here where the new beans are starting to come up. Now, there's just a little bit of this is a trial and a test, and boy, we made some mistakes. One thing is our RTK was just not quite doing as well as I'd like to see, and you can see those beans there, that right-hand row is pretty close to the wheat. And then we come in and we harvest. And you can see us taking the wheat off here, and we're comparing this to solid wheat double crop beans compared to intercrop beans. And so you can see us harvesting the wheat off here, and I don't have any doubt that you can pick up quickly that the outer duals of that combine are running over 2 bean rows. Each outer dual is running right down a bean row. And that brought me quite an anxious moment as I watched it. You also see that Gregg was too cheap on a 35-foot draper head to spend over $9,000 on the stripper units. That's a poly unit that pushes the bean plant down so you could lower the head deeper into the wheat. Being a typical farmer, I said, I don't think I need to spend that. I think I'll just manage the head accordingly. And you can see the end result here. You can see the beans growing up. But how did it come out? So this is a big enough field that we were able to split it in thirds. So we had just plain soybeans out here that we planted following corn. And then we had the intercrop, okay? That was the wheat. And then we had wheat with double crop. A third, and a third out here. So let's talk about the wheat yields first. So the wheat itself, obviously there's nothing here. The wheat here, on just standard wheat, it ran 96 bushel an acre. Over here where we had the 40-inch strips, so half the field was soybeans yet, just every other 40 inches was wheat. So that came in here and that ran 74 bushel. That should have probably gave Gregg a little bit of a question mark right out of the gate. In my mind, that wheat yield is too high. It really starts to beg the question as well, if the wheat yielded that much, my initial goal was to have 60 bushel wheat and 60 bushel beans. That's what we started out to be. Well, when it comes to soybean yields, over here, just straight beans, they went, now we bid the same variety all the way across. I probably wouldn't do that the next time, but I want to try to keep it all apples to apples. I don't think this bean was quite a bush enough bean. If you look at it here, you're already shouting that for you guys that have been super successful in intercrop. And so the double crop beans, they went 44 bushel. And the wheat beans, they went 35 bushel. And this is all Gregg's fault. This does not mean that intercropping doesn't work. I made some mistakes. First of all, I should have done what? I probably should have only put out a 30-inch strip of wheat with a 30-inch bare strip of one single row right down that strip. By having a 40-inch, and I thought, well, if I put a 20-inch row in there, it gives me 10 inches on each side. If everything matched perfectly, the drill was totally different than the soybean planter. As you could probably see what we were planting with there. And I did my very best to get the RTK to line up each time. But we just made some mistakes. I did way too much damage with the combine. That tire's got to be stripped off, that outer dual. I'll just be honest with you, our combines are already gone. The John Deere dealer gave me a combine to cut this trial out. I was a little nervous about stripping a dual off and loading that thing up, and all of a sudden we got an axle trouble. And so there's just some things that we would need to do different. At the same time, let's do the dollars and cents. We might as well finish this painful thing for you and see exactly what it is. We're going to use what? We're going to use $6 for wheat and $13 for soybeans, okay? So over here, the profitability was $975 an acre. So here, on the double crop wheat, we're $576 for the wheat. So we'll do wheat first, and then we'll do soybeans. So the soybeans there at 44 bushels was $572. So we had a total here of $1,148 gross. We had over here $975 gross. And over here we had wheat at $450 gross, and then the soybeans were $455. So the intercropping was $905. So already you can see we're already under the gun. Then we'll put the seeding in there. We might as well put the seed costs in there. We'll leave that in there. So if you come in here with seed, we had $55 because it's only half soybeans, half wheat seeded. Over here we had $110 on the double crop, all wheat, all soybeans, and over here we had $70 for the seed. So all said and done, if you look at the net, we had $850 an acre, $1,038, and over here we had $905. So double crop, ended up making $188 more than the other two systems. So for our seed fields, and you saw already, I already showed you this winter, we started planting wheat in isolation. Our plan is we're going to go ahead and put wheat in. We're going to cut it off the combine. We'll come in with the baler. We'll bale the residue off. Seems to me that really helps. I baled for a neighbor. He had 52 bushel double crop beans, a little better soil than what we had. I just liked the way they looked. I liked the way he got them in. And so we would come back in then on our seed isolation acres, we'd come in and have a double crop program. And I think of the way wheat's taken off, and I see the way the dollar potential is, that we can sell wheat right now, and I can see that we can still get more than $12 for soybeans. I kind of like where this is going. I'm a little bit ashamed at our intercropping. I've told you many times, if you're going to do trials, don't cut corners. Set it up so that it wins. Make it for success. And so sometimes I don't follow my own advice. But at the same time, we learned a lot. And it's things that I'm excited about where it could go. As we talk about fun and how the year went, I've never had more fun than watching the 360 rain unit in our fields. Now, we introduced it a year ago in January. A year ago, we introduced it to you, and we talked about the tons and tons of potential. We talked about the yield advantage. We talked about all the things that line up. And so we had 6 of these machines running this past year. We got 9 of them going out next year. We're running in Florida as we speak on a large dairy down there making silage corn. And we are having as much fun as you can possibly have, you know, chasing cats, because there's a lot of problems. And you think about production and where we're waiting on the supply chain. You know, I used to think, and I used to in the days gone by, if a supplier told me more than 8 weeks, I would look at them and say, I don't think you want my business very bad. Right now, when you talk about ordering new products and prototype products from a supplier, nothing for them to say 52 weeks. And I'm like, that's a year. And so we're fighting through all those things. But let's talk about rain. So 360 rain. Where are we at and what are the things that we're working on with it? So I'll give you a little review. There's going to be a whole session. If you go back into the website, you can find all these different breakouts. There's a breakout there called 360 Rain that'll go in depth. And you'll see me in Florida, and you'll see all the potential and the changes that we've made. Every year there's a different generation. That's just the way products run. That's when you invent, you fix things that you'd like to change. Let's just talk a few highlights here to whet your appetite to watch that whole session where Tim and I are going in depth of the things that we've done. So it starts out where field shape. So in other words, no longer, you know, when you and I think about a pivot, most pivots like to run in a square. And they're able to come in and they're able to run that. For us, it's no longer matters what the shape is. No matter what you have, and you can see it there, that's a 110-acre field that we're running a rain unit in for a neighbor, and we're doing commercial corn on corn there, and we're able to find and follow any type of that. There's what we call a 50-yard line in the field, and so the machine, let's just draw it out here quick. In the center of that, we'll just do a 160-acre square to make it easy. So the wells here are the hydrant. The rain unit runs back and forth on this 50-yard line. And then it comes and it turns. And wherever it goes, it's laying down hose and picking up hose. So as it goes here to the north, mark the north and south end rows, it came here east, and it came, now it's going north, and it's doing what? 60-foot or 120-foot boom pattern. And so it lays the hose out, and it's watering that corn. How much are we going to water? A ½ inch a week. And so we're going to come in here and water. We're going to go out, and then we're going to come right back, picking up hose. We're going to turn towards the well. Then we're going to turn to the south. And we're going to do either 48 rows or 24 rows of watering. We come back to the well, and pretty soon you can start to see exactly how this system is going to go through. In a matter of 5 days, on 160 acres, we're going to put a ½ inch of water out. And I'm telling you, if you want happy corn, you start following a rain system. So field shape was the main thing that we said. We've got to be able to handle any triangle, railroad tracks coming through that field, any kind of tree lines, groves, anything you have, we should be able to go around. High power lines, windmills, all that's manageable. Things that we'll take a look at. The second main thing, we said we need to be able to manage how many gallons per minute you need. Systems need what, 1,000 gallon? Least they can do is 700 gallon. We said, no, 250 max, 100 gallon or less, we should be able to go in there and water. So a lot less cost of putting a well in. But at the end of the day, it's the nuts and bolts is what you see right here. And this will get your heart pumping. When you see young corn where you're able to come in there and you're able to give it this kind of a drink of water. And so you're seeing that just in that 15-inch band right around the stalk of that corn. So when I say a half an inch an acre, I'm talking about the whole field. What the plant sees is an inch of water a week. And so as you see it coming at us there, in that case, it's putting on 2,500s. So it's coming right at us, putting on a quarter of an inch. It's going to go back of a quarter inch for a half inch that day. What the plant sees is an inch of water. And I tell you what, we started saying what? I started this, 5 years ago, telling you we were bringing something that was going to increase your yields in one step by 50 bushel. I said what? I said in one giant Mother May I step, we're going to give you a 50 bushel bump. And in the research we've done over the multiple years, we're sitting at 51 bushel. So I'm excited. And you can see here, exactly on the screen, you can see that soil type coming up through at an angle, and you see the red line, and you can see in this case, this year, that was 65 bushel right to the line with the yield map. So go in and take a look at the 360 rain whole session. I think I'll be able to light a fire in you. I know this, for me, I can't wait for the spring of April and May where we can get started. And so as you and I think, we'll just close here. Yes, you and I like to change some things in the way inputs are. It makes our teeth kind of grit, doesn't it, when you see nitrogen over $1 a pound. At the same time, let's not spend too much time with that. Do what you can on getting it prepaid, getting your own storage built. Those are all good things. Being in control, I'm a control freak, and you can see it. Let's pay attention to crop potential. Price potential. If you can lock in a profit, maybe it's time you and I start to do that with some percentage of our corn. But when it comes to production, to me, this is where it's at. For you and I, in 2022, as it's been said so many times, we're shooting for the moon. And we can do that. I can't wait to bump into you where you and I can trade stories on things that are really working for our family farms.